Red warning lights flashed across the mining ship's control room as Amy Foster stared at the strange readings on her screen. The energy signature coming from the dead planet below made no sense. Dead planets weren't supposed to give off any energy at all. Yet here was something powerful enough to light up their sensors from 3,000 miles away. "Ben, what do you make of this?" Amy called to her chief engineer, a stocky man with grease-stained hands who never seemed to sleep. Ben Rodriguez wiped his hands on his work clothes and walked over to look at the screen. His thick eyebrows drew together as he studied the data. "Never seen anything like it, Captain. The energy pattern keeps changing like it's alive or something. Could be some kind of old technology down there." Amy drummed her fingers on the control panel. The Aurora's Edge was supposed to be on a simple mining run, collecting rare metals from asteroid fields. They weren't explorers or scientists, just workers trying to make enough money to keep flying. But something about those readings bothered her. The energy pattern seemed almost desperate, like a distress call. "Grace, what's your medical opinion?" Amy turned to Dr. Grace Liu, the ship's medic who doubled as their science officer when needed. Grace pushed her glasses up her nose and studied the readings. The energy signature has a biological component. It's weak, but steady, like a heartbeat. "If I had to guess, I'd say something is alive down there and it's in trouble." The bridge fell quiet except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Amy's crew of 12 looked at her, waiting for orders. They all knew she had a soft spot for rescues, even when it meant taking risks they couldn't afford. "Set us down near the energy source," Amy decided. "Prep the shuttle and grab emergency medical supplies. We're going to take a look." 2 hours later, Amy found herself standing in front of a massive metal structure built into the side of a cliff. The building looked ancient and alien, with smooth, curved walls covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. Most of the structure had collapsed, but one section still had power running through it. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Sam Chen, their security officer, as he checked his weapon for the third time. "Stay alert, but don't shoot anything unless I give the order," Amy said. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." They made their way through broken corridors filled with strange equipment. Everything was too big for humans, built for creatures that were either much taller or had more limbs. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and the air tasted metallic. The energy readings led them to a large room filled with dozens of tall glass containers. Most were dark and empty, but a few still glowed with soft blue light. Amy approached the nearest working container and nearly jumped back in shock. Inside was something that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. The creature was small, no bigger than a house cat, with delicate silver-blue scales that caught the light like jewels. Tiny wings were folded against its back, and small horns curved from its head. It floated in some kind of fluid, connected to the container by thin tubes. "Is that a dragon?" Sam whispered. "Looks like a baby," Grace said, pressing her face close to the glass. "And it's dying. Look at these readings. The life support system is failing." Amy moved from container to container. Most held the remains of other creatures, long dead and rotting. This little dragon was the only living thing left in the entire facility. "Can we get it out?" Amy asked. Ben was already examining the container's control panel. "I think so. The system is simple enough, even if I can't read the writing. But Captain, we don't know anything about this creature. It could be dangerous." Amy looked at the small dragon again. Even unconscious and barely alive, there was something peaceful about it. The creature looked innocent, almost fragile. "It's just a baby, Ben. We can't leave it here to die." "The stasis pod is losing power fast," Grace reported, reading her medical scanner. "If we're going to do this, it has to be now." Ben worked quickly, bypassing safety systems and rerouting power. Steam hissed from the container as the fluid drained away. The small dragon's body shivered as cool air hit its skin for the first time in who knew how many years. Grace caught the creature as it fell from the container, wrapping it in thermal blankets. It was even smaller than it had looked inside the stasis pod, and its breathing was weak and irregular. "It's severely malnourished," Grace said, running her scanner over the dragon. "Dehydrated too. We need to get it back to the ship immediately." The building shook around them as more sections collapsed. Whatever power source had kept the facility running was finally dying. They ran through crumbling corridors as ceiling panels fell behind them. Back on the ship, Grace worked frantically to stabilize their unexpected patient. The dragon was so weak it could barely lift its head, but its eyes were alert and intelligent. They were large eyes, bright green like emeralds, and they seemed to take in everything around them with curious interest. "I've never seen anything like its biology," Grace muttered as she set up IV lines with nutrient fluid. "The bone structure is completely unique, and there are organs here I can't even identify. But the basic systems are similar enough to Earth. Animals that I think I can help it." The dragon made a small sound barely audible like a kitten's mew. At that moment, Whiskers, the ship's orange tabby cat, wandered into the medical bay looking for attention. The cat jumped onto the examination table and sniffed at the dragon curiously. Something remarkable happened. The dragon's eyes locked onto Whiskers with intense focus. It struggled to lift its head, watching every movement the cat made. When Whiskers began to purr and rub against Grace's arm, the dragon made that small mewing sound again as if trying to copy the cat. "Well, that's interesting," Grace said. "I think it's trying to communicate with Whiskers." Over the next few days, as the dragon slowly recovered, it became clear that the creature had formed some kind of connection with the ship's cat. Wherever Whiskers went, the dragon tried to follow, dragging itself along on weak legs. When Whiskers ate, the dragon would try to eat from the same bowl. When Whiskers groomed itself, the dragon would attempt the same motions with its small, clawed hands. "I think it believes it's a cat," Amy said, watching the dragon try to meow. Instead of a cat sound, tiny puffs of silver flame came from its mouth. "That's impossible," Grace replied. "It's clearly an intelligent species. Look at the bone structure of its skull. That brain cavity is huge. This creature is probably smarter than we are." But the evidence was hard to ignore. The dragon had imprinted on Whiskers as if the cat was its parent. It copied every behavior, from the way Whiskers walked to the way the cat curled up to sleep. The only difference was that when the dragon tried to purr, it created a sound like distant thunder that made the ship's metal walls vibrate. Amy named the creature Pip, after the small size and pip-like sounds it made when trying to meow. The name seemed to please the dragon, who would cock its head when called, just like Whiskers did. Ben was the first to notice that strange things happened around Pip. Tools that had been broken would mysteriously repair themselves overnight. The ship's engines ran smoother when Pip was nearby. Food seemed to taste better and minor injuries healed faster than they should. "It's probably just coincidence," Grace said, but she didn't sound convinced. Amy wasn't sure what they had rescued from that alien facility, but one thing was certain: their lives had just become much more interesting. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered what would happen when their small cat started to grow up. 3 weeks after the rescue, Pip had grown noticeably larger and much more active. What had once been a creature the size of a kitten was now closer to the size of a small dog, though she still tried to squeeze into the same tiny spaces where Whiskers liked to hide. Her scales had brightened to a brilliant blue-silver that seemed to shift color depending on her mood, and her wings had developed enough that she could glide short distances around the ship. Amy found herself spending most of her free time watching Pip's increasingly bizarre attempts at being a cat. The dragon had developed her own version of meowing that involved small puffs of flame in different colors. Blue flames meant she was happy. White flames meant she wanted attention, and red flames usually meant she was frustrated about something. The litter box incident had been a disaster that Ben was still trying to repair. Pip had watched Whiskers use the box and decided she should do the same. The problem was that dragon waste apparently contained some kind of acid that melted through the deck plating and 2 levels of the ship before Ben could contain it. Now Pip had her own specially designed waste area with acid-resistant materials, though she still seemed confused about why her litter box was so different from Whiskers. "She's trying to groom herself like a cat again," Grace called from the medical bay, where she was treating a crew member's minor burn, "but every time she licks her paw, little sparks fly off her tongue. Poor thing keeps accidentally singeing her own scales." Amy walked over to find Pip sitting in exactly the same position as Whiskers, one leg raised as she attempted to clean. With her tongue, every lick produced tiny electrical discharges that made her scales stand on end. Whiskers sat nearby, watching with what Amy could swear was amusement. Maybe we should teach her a different way to groom, Amy suggested. Pip looked up at the sound of Amy's voice and made her happy blue flame meow. She trotted over on 4 legs, though Amy had noticed she could walk on just her hind legs when she wanted to use her front claws like hands. The dragon rubbed against Amy's legs just like Whiskers did, except that Pip's version of affection involved a warm, tingly sensation that made Amy feel relaxed and energetic at the same time. "Captain," called Tim Park from the navigation station, "you need to see this. I found something in that alien database we recovered." Amy followed Tim to his workstation, where he had translated some of the alien text they'd found at the research facility. Pip trotted along behind her, occasionally stopping to chase her own tail in perfect imitation of Whiskers. "These files talk about something called stellar drakes," Tim explained, showing Amy the translated documents. "According to this, they're one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. Adults can supposedly manipulate matter, fold space, and possess intelligence beyond anything we can imagine." Amy looked down at Pip, who was now attempting to squeeze herself into a box that was far too small for her, just like she'd seen Whiskers do. "You're saying our little cat impersonator is some kind of cosmic super being?" "That's what it looks like. The texts describe infant drakes as having massive potential, but needing years of proper training to develop their abilities safely. Without guidance, they either develop dangerous mental instabilities or their powers remain dormant." As if to prove Tim's point, Pip succeeded in somehow fitting her entire body into the too small box, despite the laws of physics suggesting this should be impossible. She poked her head up with what looked like a proud expression, flame meowing happily at her achievement. "She's manipulating space around herself," Tim whispered in amazement. "She compressed the dimensions of the box to make it bigger on the inside. But she thinks she's just being a good cat," Amy said, scratching Pip behind her small horns. The dragon's purring response created harmonic vibrations that somehow tuned the ship's engines to run at peak efficiency. Over the following days, Amy began keeping a list of Pip's cat behaviors and their increasingly impossible results. When Pip tried to bring Amy presents like Whiskers did, she would disappear from the ship for hours and return with gifts that shouldn't exist. A bottled aurora that painted rainbow light across the walls, a small crystal that played music from some alien world, and once a tiny star that provided warm, safe light without any heat or radiation. "Where is she getting these things?" Ben asked, studying the star crystal with fascination. "There's nothing like this for light years in any direction." "I think she's making them," Grace said. "Watch her when she's playing. Yesterday I saw her chasing what looked like a ball of light. But when I got closer, I realized she had created the light out of nothing. She's unconsciously using abilities that could reshape reality, but only in ways that fit her idea of normal cat behavior." The most dramatic example came when Pip decided to mark her territory. Whiskers had a habit of rubbing against certain spots on the ship to leave his scent, so Pip began doing the same. The difference was that when Pip marked something, she left behind a psychic imprint that made everyone who touched that spot feel happy and safe. Soon, half the ship's surfaces had been claimed by their dragon cat, turning the entire vessel into a place of perfect comfort and peace. "This is getting out of hand," Sam said, though he was smiling as he said it. "Yesterday she decided to hunt like cats do. Do you know what she brought back? A comet. A whole comet, somehow shrunk down to the size of a mouse. She dropped it at my feet like it was a dead bird." Amy had seen that particular incident. Pip had been very proud of her hunt, prancing around with the miniaturized comet in her mouth before presenting it as a gift. The comet was still sitting in Amy's quarters, occasionally releasing tiny meteor showers that sparkled like glitter in the air. The crew was adapting to life with their unusual pet, but Amy worried about what would happen as Pip continued to grow. Already she was the size of a medium dog, and her attempts at cat-like behavior were having increasingly powerful effects on their surroundings. The situation became more complicated when Pip developed separation anxiety. If Amy left the ship for more than a few hours, Pip would cry with small flame meows that echoed telepathically through space. Other ships had started receiving strange mental images of a sad dragon whenever they were in the area. "She's broadcasting," Distress signals across 3-star systems, Tim reported with amazement. Ships are asking us if we need rescue because they're picking up what feels like a lost child calling for help. Can we explain that our pet dragon thinks she's a cat and gets lonely? Amy asked. I don't think anyone would believe us. The real test came when they docked at a space station to resupply. Pip had never been around so many strangers before, and she became nervous and clingy. She wrapped herself around Amy's legs like an oversized cat, but her anxiety caused reality to fluctuate around them. Gravity shifted randomly, making people float or become suddenly heavy. Colors became more vivid and electronic devices started working better than they were designed to. Ma'am, said a station security officer, your pet is affecting our environmental systems. The air has never been this clean, and our lights are somehow producing more energy than they're consuming. Amy looked down at Pip, who was trying to hide behind her legs despite being too large to actually hide anywhere. The dragon's scales had turned a nervous purple color, and she was making small whimpering flame sounds that were causing the station's metal walls to hum in sympathy. She's just scared of new places, Amy explained. She's very well behaved normally. As if to demonstrate, Pip tried to sit like Whiskers did, wrapping her tail around her feet. The motion accidentally created a small gravity well that made several people stumble, though Pip didn't seem to notice. She was too busy trying to look as small and cat-like as possible. The station manager eventually asked them to leave, not because Pip was dangerous, but because her unconscious reality alterations were making the other visitors uncomfortable. People reported feeling unusually happy and peaceful, and several claimed their chronic health problems had mysteriously improved. Back on their ship, Amy sat with Pip in her quarters, trying to figure out what to do next. The dragon had curled up in Amy's lap, even though she now weighed nearly 50 pounds. She was purring her deep, harmonic purr while Whiskers groomed her scales with careful licks. You're not really a cat, are you? Amy said quietly. Pip looked up with her bright green eyes and made a questioning flame meow. Amy could swear she saw intelligence there, deeper and older than any cat, but also confusion and a desperate desire to belong. But you want to be a cat, don't you? You want to be part of our family. This time Pip's flame meow was definitely affirmative, bright blue flames that felt warm and happy. She nuzzled against Amy's chest with enough force to knock over a normal person, though somehow Amy remained perfectly balanced. Amy made a decision that would change all their lives. Instead of trying to train Pip out of her cat behaviors, she would help her be the best cat dragon she could be. If Pip wanted to be part of their crew family, then that's exactly what she would be. Whatever else happened, they would face it together. 6 months after the rescue, Pip had grown to the size of a large dog, though she still insisted on trying to curl up in Amy's lap during the evening shift. Her scales had developed an almost mirror-like quality that reflected starlight in beautiful patterns, and her wings were now large enough for short flights around the ship's cargo bay. More importantly, her attempts at cat behavior had become increasingly powerful and occasionally problematic. The first major incident happened when Amy was having trouble sleeping. Pip noticed her restlessness and decided to help by kneading Amy's pillow the way cats knead blankets. The problem was that Pip's version of kneading involved unconsciously manipulating matter at the atomic level. Amy woke up to find her pillow had been transformed into something that was still recognizably a pillow, but now provided perfect support for her head and neck while maintaining an ideal temperature throughout the night. She redesigned the molecular structure, Grace reported after scanning the pillow with medical equipment. It's still made of the same basic materials, but now it responds to body heat and pressure in ways that shouldn't be physically possible. It's like she created the perfect sleeping surface. Word spread quickly among the crew, and soon everyone was hoping Pip would decide to help with their sleeping arrangements. But Pip only needed things for Amy, apparently having decided that Amy was her primary human, just as Whiskers had chosen Amy as his favorite person. The hunting incidents became more frequent and more impressive. Pip's instincts told her to bring gifts to show her affection, but her gifts were becoming increasingly exotic. One morning, Amy found a small container of crystallized music sitting next to her coffee. When opened, the crystals played a hauntingly beautiful melody that made everyone who heard it feel peaceful and content. "Where does she get these things?" Ben asked, examining the music crystals with a jeweler's loupe. "The energy readings suggest these crystals exist in multiple dimensions, simultaneously." Amy had no answer. Pip seemed to simply disappear from the ship periodically and return with impossible gifts. Yesterday it had been a flower that bloomed in perfect vacuum, displaying colors that had no names. The day before that, she had brought back a small piece of what Tim's instruments identified as compressed time, a marble-sized object that aged everything around it at a slower rate. "She's not just finding these things," Tim said, studying his readings. "I think she's creating them. She goes out there and literally makes gifts out of cosmic forces, then brings them back like a cat bringing dead mice." The situation escalated when they received a distress call from a passenger liner that had lost life support. Amy immediately changed course to help, but when they arrived, they found the liner's problems were worse than reported. The ship was breaking apart, with several hull breaches and failing gravity generators. Pip sensed the danger to the people on the other ship and decided to hunt something to help them. She disappeared from the cargo bay in a flash of silver light. 20 minutes later, she returned carrying something that looked like a soap bubble the size of a basketball. "She's brought us a piece of stable space," Tim whispered in amazement. "She somehow harvested a section of space-time where the physical laws are more resilient." When Ben deployed Pip's gift around the passenger liner, the ship's hull breaches sealed themselves and the gravity generators stabilized. The bubble of stable space acted like a protective shell, allowing the liner to maintain life support while they completed repairs. "How did your ship do that?" asked the liner's captain over the communication channel. Amy looked at Pip, who was sitting proudly next to the communication console, occasionally making small blue flame meows of satisfaction. "We have a very helpful crew member," Amy replied, diplomatically. The rescue made news across the sector. Ships began requesting assistance from the mysterious vessel that could repair space-time itself. Amy tried to keep Pip's abilities secret, but it became impossible when Pip decided that all the attention meant she should mark her territory more extensively. They were docked at Crossroads Haven, a major trading station, when Pip attempted her most ambitious territorial marking yet. Instead of just rubbing against surfaces, she decided to claim the entire area around their ship as her space. The psychic marking she left was so powerful that it broadcast across 3 star systems. Every ship within a dozen light years suddenly received the same telepathic message. A warm, friendly feeling combined with images of a large, happy creature that wanted everyone to know this was her family's space and they were welcome to visit as long as they were nice. "Captain Foster," came a tight voice over the communication system. "This is Admiral Stone of the Galactic Council Fleet. We need to talk." Amy's heart sank as she watched a massive Council battleship drop out of hyperspace near the station. Council ships only showed up when something had gone seriously wrong, and she had a feeling Pip's latest territorial display had attracted exactly the kind of attention they'd been trying to avoid. The meeting took place in one of Crossroads Haven's neutral conference rooms. Admiral Stone was a stern woman with gray hair and cold eyes who got straight to the point. "Captain Foster, our sensors indicate your ship is harboring a Class A strategic weapon," the Admiral said. "We've been tracking reality distortions, space-time manipulations, and telepathic broadcasts that all originate from your vessel. I'm ordering you to surrender this weapon immediately." "With respect, Admiral, we're not carrying any weapons," Amy replied. "We're just a mining crew. Don't lie to me, Captain. We have reports of your ship healing other vessels, creating impossible objects and broadcasting telepathic messages across multiple star systems. That level of power can only come from ancient alien technology or a stellar drake." Amy kept her expression neutral, though her heart was racing. "I don't know what a stellar drake is." Admiral Stone's eyes narrowed. "Stellar drakes are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. They can reshape reality with a thought and destroy entire star systems if they choose. The last war with the Drakes nearly wiped out galactic civilization. If you're harboring one of those monsters, you're putting everyone at risk." At that moment, Pip decided to investigate the new voices she was hearing. She had been napping in Amy's quarters, but the sound of strangers talking to her favorite human made her curious. She phased through the ship's hull, another cat-like behavior, since Whiskers could slip through spaces that seemed too small for him, and materialized in the conference room. The effect was immediate. Pip appeared in a shimmer of silver light, now nearly the size of a pony, with scales that caught the room's lighting like precious gems. Her wings were folded against her back, and her tail swished nervously as she took in all the new faces. Admiral, Stone went pale. Stellar Drake, she whispered, reaching for her weapon. But Pip, seeing new people, simply tried to be friendly the way Whiskers was friendly. She approached Admiral Stone and attempted to rub against the woman's legs like a cat seeking attention. The result was that Admiral Stone suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of peace and well-being, as if all her worries had been lifted away. "She's not dangerous," Amy said quickly. "She thinks she's a cat." "That's impossible," Admiral Stone said, though her voice had lost its hard edge thanks to Pip's unconscious emotional influence. "Stellar drakes are ancient, intelligent beings of immense power." Pip, pleased that the new human was no longer tense, decided to show off her hunting skills. She disappeared briefly and returned with a gift, a small star that shed gentle, warm light without any harmful radiation. She dropped it at Admiral Stone's feet and sat back on her haunches with a proud expression, waiting for praise. "She brought you a star," Amy explained. "She does that when she likes someone. Yesterday she brought me a crystallized rainbow." Admiral Stone stared at the tiny star, then at Pip, who was now attempting to purr. The sound created harmonic vibrations that made everyone in the room feel relaxed and happy. "This is unprecedented," the Admiral said slowly. "A stellar drake that believes it's a domestic animal. The implications are staggering." More council ships arrived over the next few hours, along with scientists, military officials, and representatives from a dozen different species. They all wanted to study Pip, but Pip just wanted to play and explore. She treated the entire situation like a giant social gathering, attempting to greet everyone with cat-like friendliness. The problems began when some of the council representatives tried to contain Pip for study. She didn't understand why the nice people suddenly wanted to put her in a cage, and her confusion caused reality to fluctuate around her. Gravity reversed itself randomly, time moved in slow motion, and several people reported seeing impossible colors. "She's not trying to hurt anyone," Grace explained to the increasingly nervous officials. "She's just scared and confused. She doesn't understand why you want to separate her from her family." "Family?" Admiral Stone asked. "That's how she sees us," Amy said. "We're her pride, her pack. She doesn't know she's different from us. In her mind, she's just a very large cat who happens to be good at space magic." The situation reached a crisis point when council forces tried to board the Aurora's edge to remove Pip by force. Pip sensed the threat to her family and reacted instinctively. Every weapon the council soldiers carried transformed into harmless objects. Some became flowers, others turned into small toys, and one particularly stern soldier found his rifle had become a squeaky mouse toy that meowed when squeezed. "She thinks you want to play," Amy said as Pip bounced around the soldiers excitedly, trying to initiate a game with her new toys. Admiral Stone called off the boarding attempt and requested a private meeting with Amy. "Captain Foster, I need you to understand the situation. Stellar drakes destroyed entire civilizations in the past. Even if this one thinks it's a pet, it could accidentally wipe out a star system if it has a nightmare." Amy looked through the conference room window at Pip, who was now playing with Whiskers in the ship's cargo bay. The dragon was lying on her back, letting the small cat climb all over her scales, her tail swishing happily. "She's not a weapon, Admiral. She's family, and I won't let anyone hurt her or take her away from the only home she's ever known." The standoff continued for 3 days, with council forces surrounding the station, and Amy refusing to surrender Pip. The dragon herself seemed oblivious to the tension, treating the whole situation as an extended playtime with lots of new friends. But Amy knew this couldn't last forever. Eventually, someone would decide that Pip was too dangerous to leave alone, no matter how innocent she seemed. They needed a solution that would protect both Pip and the galaxy from fears about what she might become. The answer came from an unexpected source, Pip herself, who had been listening to the debates about her future with growing confusion and sadness. She might think she was a cat, but she was still incredibly intelligent, and she had begun to understand that her very existence was causing problems for the family she loved. Late on the third night, Pip came to Amy with a gift unlike any she had brought before. It was a small crystal that contained what looked like a map of the galaxy, with one particular star system highlighted in silver light. She wants to show us something, Amy realized, looking into Pip's bright green eyes. She's trying to tell us about her home. The crystal map Pip had given Amy showed coordinates to a star system that didn't exist on any official charts. When Tim ran the numbers through their navigation computer, the results made no sense. The location seemed to occupy space that was both empty and full at the same time. It's like the system exists in folded space, Tim explained to the assembled council representatives. Our instruments can detect gravitational effects, but visually there's nothing there. It's as if an entire star system is hidden behind some kind of dimensional barrier. Admiral Stone studied the readings with growing excitement. This could be it, the lost homeworld of the stellar drakes. Legend says they retreated to a pocket dimension after the last war, but no one has ever been able to find it. Pip had been watching the discussion with unusual intensity. Normally, she would have been playing with whiskers or napping in a sunny spot, but something about the star chart seemed to hold her attention. She kept making small, questioning flame meows and pointing at the coordinates with one clawed finger. She wants to go there, Amy realized. She's been trying to tell us about her home. The decision was made to follow Pip's directions, with the Aurora's Edge escorted by 3 council ships. As they approached the coordinates, reality began to shift around them in subtle ways. Colors became more vivid, gravity felt lighter, and crew members reported feeling strangely peaceful and energetic. "We're entering some kind of dimensional field," reported Grace from her medical station. "It's not harmful, but it's definitely changing our local physics. Time seems to be moving differently here." Pip became more excited as they traveled deeper into the hidden space. Her scales brightened to an almost blinding silver, and her purring created harmonics that made the ship's hull ring like a bell. She kept pressing her face against the viewing ports, searching for something in the strange starscape ahead. Then the homeworld appeared, materializing around them like a dream, becoming real. It was unlike any planet anyone had ever seen, a world that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, with landscapes that shifted between different versions of reality. Floating islands drifted through an atmosphere that sparkled with tiny stars, and structures that looked like they were built from crystallized light dotted the surface. "Incredible," whispered Admiral Stone. "The energy readings are off the charts, but everything feels stable and peaceful." Pip was practically vibrating with excitement now, making eager flame sounds that painted aurora patterns across the ship's windows. She kept looking at Amy as if asking permission for something. "I think she wants to go home," Amy said quietly. They landed on a floating platform near what appeared to be a city made of living crystal. The buildings hummed with gentle music, and gardens of impossible flowers filled the air with scents that made everyone feel happy and relaxed. Waiting for them was a creature that took Amy's breath away. If Pip was impressive, this being was magnificent. A stellar drake the size of a small building, with scales that contained entire galaxies and wings that seemed to stretch into infinity. Yet despite her cosmic appearance, there was something grandmotherly and warm about her presence. "Welcome, little ones," the great drake said, her voice appearing directly in their minds with the warmth of a favorite teacher. "I am Elder Asterix, and I have been waiting for young Pip to come home for a very long time." Pip bounded toward the elder like an enthusiastic puppy, all thoughts of cat-like dignity forgotten in her excitement. She rushed up to Asterix and began rubbing against the larger drake's legs, purring loudly enough to create visible sound waves in the air. Elder Asterix chuckled, a sound like distant thunder mixed with wind chimes. "Yes, dear one, I am happy to see you too. But tell me, what is this interesting behavior you have learned?" Amy stepped forward nervously. "Elder Asterix, I'm Captain Amy Foster. We rescued Pip from a research station, but she's been living with us and learning from our ship's cat. She thinks she's supposed to behave like a cat." "Ah." Asterix said, her ancient eyes twinkling with amusement. That explains much. Show me, little Pip, what you have learned. Pip immediately sat in the position Whiskers used when asking for treats, wrapping her tail around her feet and making expectant blue flame meows. When Asterix reached down to pet her, Pip rubbed against the elder's massive claws and attempted to purr, creating a harmonic vibration that made the crystal city ring like a vast musical instrument. Fascinating, Asterix murmured. You have unconsciously limited your reality-shaping abilities to match what you believe cats can do. But see how even your cat behaviors operate on a cosmic scale? Your purring harmonizes with the fundamental frequencies of creation itself. The elder turned her attention to Amy and the crew. I must thank you for caring for our lost child. Pip's parents were killed in the final battle of the Old War, and she was placed in stasis before she could learn her true nature. We thought she was lost forever. What was that research station? Amy asked. Asterix's expression grew sad. A remnant of darker times, when some believed that young drakes could be weaponized or controlled. The researchers there died long ago, leaving only automated systems keeping the children in stasis. You saved not just Pip's life, but her soul. Over the following hours, Asterix explained the true nature of stellar drakes. They were ancient beings who had evolved beyond physical limitations, capable of reshaping reality through will and emotion. Adult drakes could create matter from nothing, fold space and time, and communicate across vast distances instantaneously. But power without wisdom is dangerous, Asterix explained. Young drakes must spend their first century learning control and discipline, understanding the responsibility that comes with their abilities. Pip has been unconsciously using cosmic-level powers, but because she believes she is a simple cat, she has inadvertently learned a form of restraint. Amy watched Pip playing with Whiskers in a garden of crystal flowers. The dragon was being very careful not to damage the delicate plants, using precise control over her strength that she had learned from watching Whiskers navigate the ship without breaking anything. She's been learning responsibility through cat behavior, Amy realized. Cats have to be careful around smaller things, so she's been practicing control without knowing it. Exactly, Asterix agreed. Her unusual upbringing may have been the perfect training for a young drake. She has learned to consider others, to be gentle despite her power, and to find joy in simple things. Admiral Stone, who had been listening silently, finally spoke up. Elder Asterix, the Council needs to know. Is Pip dangerous? Could she accidentally harm innocent people? Asterix considered the question carefully. Any drake could be dangerous, if they chose to be. But Pip has formed emotional bonds with your species that run deeper than instinct. She sees humans as her family, her pride. She would sooner harm herself than hurt those she loves. The elder paused, watching Pip attempt to catch a butterfly made of living light, her massive claws moving with delicate precision to avoid injuring the fragile creature. However, she is still young and untrained. As she grows, her abilities will become more powerful. She needs guidance to develop safely. Then you'll train her? Amy asked, though her heart sank at the thought of losing Pip. I could train her here, Asterix said slowly. She could learn the ancient ways, master her true nature, and take her place among the elder drakes, but the great drake looked at Pip, who had given up chasing butterflies and was now grooming herself in a patch of sunlight, occasionally singeing her own scales with tiny sparks from her tongue. But I think that would be a tragedy, Asterix continued. Pip has found something that most drakes lose in their quest for power: genuine happiness and love. She has learned to find wonder in small things and to care for others without expecting anything in return. These are not weaknesses to be trained away, but strengths to be cherished. Amy felt a surge of hope. What are you suggesting? Asterix smiled, an expression that lit up her cosmic features like a sunrise. I am suggesting that perhaps it is time for an old drake to learn new ways of being. If Pip's chosen family is willing, I would like to travel with you and train her while she continues to live as she chooses. She can learn to be both a stellar drake and the remarkable cat dragon she has become. Pip, hearing her name mentioned, trotted over and sat between Amy and Asterix. She looked back and forth between them, then made a questioning flame meow that somehow conveyed hope, love, and a deep desire not to have to choose between her two families. Amy knelt down and hugged Pip around her long neck. "What do you think, girl? Would you like Asterix to come home with us?" Pip's response was a joyful blue flame roar that created a small aurora in the air above them. She bounced between Amy and Asterix, rubbing against both of them and purring loud enough to make the ground vibrate. "I think that's a yes," Amy said, laughing as Pip knocked her over with enthusiastic affection. Admiral Stone cleared her throat. "This is highly irregular. The Council has protocols for dealing with stellar drakes." "The Council has protocols for dealing with weapons and threats," Asterix said firmly. "Pip is neither. She is a child who has found a loving family. Unless your protocols have changed to include breaking up families, I suggest you find new ones that fit this situation." The Admiral looked at Pip, who was now showing whiskers to Elder Asterix with obvious pride, making small flame meows as if introducing her best friend to her grandmother. The ancient drake listened seriously to Pip's cat speech, occasionally, nodding as if she understood perfectly. "I'll have to report this to the High Council," Admiral Stone said finally. "But I suppose if an elder drake is willing to take responsibility for her training, and if she remains with humans who can provide guidance and social behavior, perhaps we can work out an arrangement." That night, as the crew prepared to return to their ship with their expanded family, Amy sat with Pip and Asterix watching the stars wheel overhead in impossible patterns. Pip was curled up between them, alternately grooming herself and purring contentedly. "Are you sure about this?" Amy asked Asterix. "Giving up your home to travel on a mining ship with a dragon who thinks she's a cat?" Asterix chuckled. "My dear Captain, I have spent 3,000 years in contemplation and study. I think it is time I learned what it means to be part of a family. Besides," she added, watching Pip successfully catch her own tail after several attempts, "I suspect I have as much to learn from Pip as she does from me." Pip looked up at both of them with bright, happy eyes and made a soft flame meow that somehow conveyed perfect contentment. She had found her birth family and kept her chosen family. As far as she was concerned, she was the luckiest cat in the entire galaxy. 1 year later, life aboard the Aurora's Edge had settled into a routine that would have seemed impossible to Amy before Pip entered their lives. The ship now hummed with a gentle energy that made everything work better than it should, powered by Pip's contented purring, and guided by navigation instincts that could find safe passage through the most dangerous regions of space. Pip had grown into a magnificent creature the size of a small shuttle, with scales that shifted color like oil on water, and wings that seemed to contain tiny galaxies when she spread them wide. Yet she still tried to sit in Amy's lap during important meetings, still brought impossible gifts as tokens of affection, and still considered herself fundamentally a very large, very special cat. Elder Asterix had adapted to ship life with surprising ease for a being who had spent millennia in cosmic contemplation. She had compressed her physical form to fit comfortably in the ship's expanded cargo bay, which Pip had somehow made bigger on the inside without changing its outside dimensions. The ancient drake spent her days teaching Pip about her heritage while learning human customs and the subtle art of being part of a crew family. "Today we will work on conscious reality manipulation," Asterix announced during one of Pip's lessons, while Amy watched from the observation deck above the cargo bay. Pip sat attentively, her tail wrapped around her feet in perfect cat posture, though her tail was now long enough to coil twice around her body. She had learned to consciously control her flame meows, producing different colors and intensities, to communicate more precisely with both her human and drake families. "Show me how you create your gifts," Asterix instructed. Pip concentrated for a moment, then disappeared in a shimmer of silver light. She returned seconds later carrying a small object that looked like a soap bubble filled with swirling colors. When Amy touched it later, she discovered it contained the sound of rain on a summer day, somehow preserved in crystal form. "Excellent technique," Asterix said approvingly. "But tell me, why do you always bring gifts to Amy specifically?" Pip's response was a complex series of colored flames that Asterix had taught her to use like spoken language. Amy couldn't understand the flame speech yet, but she recognized the warm, loving tones. "She says you are the alpha of her pride," Asterix translated with amusement. "In Cat's social structure, gifts are brought to the most important member of the group. She is showing respect and affection according to the behavioral patterns she learned from Whiskers." As if summoned by his name, Whiskers appeared and wound himself around Pip's massive legs. The dragon immediately lowered her head so the cat could groom the scales behind her horns, a daily ritual that both animals clearly enjoyed. "The remarkable thing," Asterix continued, "is that Pip has unconsciously created a hybrid behavior system that combines Drake instincts with cat social patterns. She uses cosmic-level abilities to express feline affection. It should be impossible, but it works perfectly for her." Amy had seen the truth of this over the past year. Pip could now consciously fold space to take the ship anywhere in the galaxy, instantly, but she only did so when the crew needed to reach their destination quickly. She could manipulate matter at the quantum level, but mostly used this ability to make sure everyone's meals were perfectly seasoned and their beds were exactly the right temperature. She had developed telepathic abilities that spanned star systems, but primarily used them to stay in mental contact with Amy when they were separated. The crew had become famous throughout the galaxy as the ship with the tame stellar drake. Other vessels would request their help with impossible problems, knowing that Pip would cheerfully solve anything if it meant helping people and making Amy proud of her. "Captain Foster," came a call over the ship's communication system. "We're receiving a distress signal from the merchant vessel Lucky Strike. They're caught in a gravitational anomaly, and their engines are failing." Amy looked down at Pip, who had already perked up at the word distress. The dragon's scales had shifted to a determined blue-green color that Amy had learned meant she was ready to help someone. "What do you think, girl? Want to go save some people?" Pip's response was an enthusiastic roar of flame that created a small rainbow in the air. She bounded to her feet, accidentally knocking over several pieces of equipment with her tail, then looked sheepish and quickly repaired them with a casual wave of her claws. "Still working on spatial awareness," Asterix noted with fond exasperation. "She forgets how large she's become." The rescue was routine by their standards, though it would have been impossible for anyone else. Pip simply reached out with her abilities and gently moved the Lucky Strike to safety, treating the massive merchant vessel like a toy she was relocating for a game. The gravitational anomaly she solved by convincing it to behave more reasonably, using a combination of physics manipulation and what Amy could only describe as cosmic-level persuasion. "How did you do that?" asked the Lucky Strike's captain, over the communication channel. Amy looked at Pip, who was now playing with the gravitational fields around their ship, making small objects float in artistic patterns while Whiskers chased them with obvious delight. "We have a very talented crew member," Amy replied as she always did. Later that evening, as they traveled toward their next mining assignment, Amy sat in her quarters working on reports while Pip dozed nearby. The dragon had somehow arranged herself so that her body curled protectively around Amy's chair while her head rested near Amy's feet, just like a cat sleeping near its favorite person. Asterix materialized in the room, a skill she had developed to move around the ship without taking up too much physical space. "She has created a dimensional pocket around this entire vessel," the Elder Drake reported. "We exist in a small realm of perfected space where nothing can truly go wrong and everyone feels safe and loved." Amy looked around her quarters, noting how everything seemed just a little more comfortable, a little more perfect than it should be. The lighting was always exactly right. The temperature never varied from ideal, and even her oldest, most battered furniture felt like it was made for her specifically. "Is that safe?" Amy asked. "Living in an artificial pocket dimension?" "Completely safe," Asterix assured her. "Pip has essentially made a home for her family that exists slightly outside normal space. We can still interact with the regular universe, but within the ship's immediate area, her love and protection make everything better." Amy reached down to scratch behind Pip's horns, and the dragon made a sleepy purring sound that vibrated through the deck plates. "She's made us our own little corner of paradise, hasn't she?" "More than that," Asterix said softly. She has solved one of the great philosophical problems of Drake society. We have always struggled with the balance between power and connection, between cosmic awareness and simple happiness. Pip has found a way to be both transcendent and grounded, both infinitely powerful and perfectly content with small pleasures. Over the following months, Amy began to notice that Pip's influence extended beyond their ship. Everywhere they traveled, they left behind small improvements, space stations where the air became cleaner and the lights worked better, planets where the weather turned more favorable, and trade routes where dangerous anomalies mysteriously resolved themselves. She's terraforming reality, Tim reported with wonder. Not changing things dramatically, just making everything a little bit better wherever we go. Ships that dock near us report improved efficiency, fewer system failures, and crew members who feel happier and more energetic. Pip seemed unaware that she was having these effects. As far as she was concerned, she was simply being a good cat by making sure her territory was safe and comfortable for everyone who visited. The changes weren't limited to technology and environment. Amy noticed that conflicts seemed to resolve more easily when Pip was around. People found it easier to forgive old grudges, and strangers were more likely to help each other. Pip's fundamental nature as a creature who saw everyone as potential family members was somehow making that reality more likely for everyone she encountered. She's not just manipulating matter and energy, Asterix explained during one of their evening talks. She's influencing probability itself, making positive outcomes more likely through sheer force of loving optimism. The final proof of Pip's unique gift came during a crisis that threatened to tear apart the crew's found family. Ben had received an offer to join a prestigious engineering firm on Earth. Grace had been invited to head a medical research team, and Tim was considering returning to his home planet to be with his aging parents. Amy tried to be supportive of their career opportunities, but the thought of losing her crew family was heartbreaking. Pip sensed the emotional turmoil and became increasingly anxious, her scales shifting through worried colors as she tried to understand why everyone seemed sad. One evening, Amy found Pip sitting alone in the cargo bay, looking smaller and more vulnerable than she had since her early days on the ship. The dragon was making soft, questioning flame meows that somehow conveyed confusion and fear. "What's wrong, girl?" Amy asked, sitting down next to her massive friend. Pip's response was a complex pattern of colored flames that Asterix translated as, "Is the pride breaking apart? Are my humans leaving? Did I do something wrong?" Amy felt her heart break at the pain in Pip's voice. "No, sweetie, you didn't do anything wrong, it's just sometimes people have to make difficult choices about their lives." That night, Pip did something she had never done before. Instead of bringing Amy a gift from outside the ship, she gave her something from her own heart, a small crystal that contained all of Pip's memories of their family together. Every shared meal, every rescue mission, every quiet moment of contentment was preserved in perfect detail. When Amy touched the crystal, she experienced their journey from Pip's perspective. She felt the dragon's overwhelming love for each crew member, her joy at being accepted as part of their family, and her deep fear of losing the only home she had ever known. But she also felt something else, Pip's unconscious influence on space around them. The dragon hadn't just been making reality better. She had been creating a pocket dimension where her chosen family could always be together, where distance and time worked differently, where love could overcome any separation. "She's made it so we can all have what we want," Amy realized, calling an emergency crew meeting. "Look at these readings. The ship exists in accelerated time during our voyages, but returns to normal time when we dock. Ben can spend months working on Earth projects while only days pass for the rest of us. Grace can conduct her research and still be home for dinner. Tim can visit his parents regularly without missing our adventures." The solution was so elegant and so perfectly Pip that Amy wondered why she hadn't seen it sooner. Their dragon hadn't just been learning to be a cat. She had been learning what it meant to be family, and families, Pip had decided, should never have to choose between love and dreams. As the years passed, the Aurora's Edge became legend throughout the galaxy. The ship that could be everywhere at once, crewed by humans who never seemed to age. or grow apart, powered by a stellar Drake who had chosen love over power and had somehow managed to have both. Amy stood on the bridge one evening, watching stars wheel by in impossible patterns as Pip navigated by instinct and affection. The dragon was now so large that she existed primarily as a consciousness that surrounded the ship, manifesting physical form only when she wanted to play with Whiskers or curl up with her human family. "Any regrets?" asked Asterix, who had become as much a part of their crew family as Pip herself. Amy looked around at her friends, at Whiskers napping in a patch of artificial sunlight, at the impossible beauty of the space Pip had created for them. Somewhere in the ship's expanded dimensions, Ben was working on an engineering project that would revolutionize space travel. Grace was developing medical techniques that would save millions of lives, and Tim was teaching his grandchildren about navigation among the stars. "None," Amy said simply. "This is home." From somewhere in the quantum foam around them came the sound of cosmic purring, and Amy felt the familiar warmth of Pip's love surrounding them all. They were family, they were home, and they were exactly where they belonged, among the stars, in a little pocket of reality where a dragon who thought she was a cat had learned that the greatest power in the universe was the ability to make the people you love happy. In the ship's expanded cargo bay, Whiskers opened one eye, stretched languidly, and went back to sleep in the certain knowledge that he was the best-groomed cat in the galaxy, tended to by a devoted companion who happened to reshape reality with every purr.